Today, I wanted to chat about my favorite sci-fi fantasy book series of all time. The fantasy genre is the one that I read the most, and I lumped some sci-fi books in there because I don't read as much sci-fi, and especially in terms of series, I don't have that many. But in terms of fantasy, a lot of my reading in fantasy is series because a lot of fantasy books are series. And so I wanted to have a chance to shout out all those. They are in no particular order. Apart from a couple choices, most of the series I will talk about here are finished and completed, and I chose books that have at least a couple books out. I will just go alphabetically by author name because I could not be able to choose. Don't ask me to choose only one. Without further ado, let's jump in because we have 10 of those to go in. So the first one on my list is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, and the series is the first long. I especially love this first trilogy. This is a whole world, so there's 10 books overall. I've only read the first 5. I've read the first trilogy, the first Law trilogy, and then I've read the first 2 standalone books in their overarching world. This is a grimdark fantasy. I had so much fun actually following all those terrible people. We follow a person who tortures people. Sure, he's had a very terrifying background. A lot of terrible things happen to him, but he is horrible. He's only in there for himself, only thinking about himself, but it was so much fun to be in his head and to be in the head of so many other people too. I also think grimdark has this power to make you really doubt at the end of it, but what was the point? Because I think it is the point in grimdark to tell yourself, at the end of it all, we are worse than what we started with. The people who are terrible are the ones who are rewarded, and the actual few heroic people die or suffer horrible things. But it was weaved in with such humor and such, I don't know, heart to the story still, that I really enjoyed my time. I still need to continue. I think I'm up to Red Country from Joe Abercrombie, and I have every intention to continue and finish the First Law universe. Number 2, we have The Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. This one was simply just fun. I love the heist element, and I think the writing in this is impeccable. Like, the pacing of everything goes so well into place. You're following this gang of 5 people and they recruit a 6th one for the impossible heist that they have to do. You're adding more and more POVs, but I think it works really well because you're also doing everything chronologically. Apart from a few flashbacks to someone's childhood, also every chapter is a POV and you always have as a title who you're following, so it's really quick and easy to see that. I did read the Shadow and Bone trilogy before I read Six of Crows, and I thought the main characters in Shadow and Bone were so annoying to me, but in Six of Crows, I really enjoyed all of them, and I love Kaz and Inej. These are some of my favorite characters ever. Number 3 on my list, The Great Coast series by Sebastien de Castell, the first book being Traitor's Blade. This is essentially a dark fantasy version of the Three Musketeers, but make it 10 years later after they've been betrayed. So we are following Falco Valmont and his 2 best friends and fellow greatcoats, Kest and Brasty, and I love those characters to death. I loved them from, I think, page 5 of the first book, and that's saying a lot. The opening scene of this series is so good and shows you so well what the rest of the series will be. It's so good. I think also it weaves in this humor in this darker world that works so well. You're following one POV, Falco Valmont, the whole way through. And he has this view about the world that is very interesting. He is very cynical in one way, but also he's very optimistic all the time about their odds, because time and again they have beaten those odds. They were supposed to die and they didn't. So every time he thinks the end is near and this time they're gonna die, but also they never did. So of course he's a little bit optimistic too. And that makes sense. So we're following Falco and his two fellow greatcoats 10 years after their king died. They were designated to be greatcoats by the king, and essentially they were working as magistrates in all the villages around the kingdom to deliver justice whenever there was a crime being committed. And they were traveling from village to village to help deliver this justice. They were using songs to also deliver all the laws that the kingdom had put in place to let all the villagers understand those laws without being able to read or understanding very complicated jargon. It is a really interesting world because obviously we're 10 years later after the king died and the dukes divided the kingdom into their own little fiefdom, and the justice in this world is gone. But Falco and his two friends are still following the precepts of the greatcoats. They're still doing whatever the king told them. Just before he died, he gave each of the greatcoats a mission. It was a deathbed promise, and they were so loyal to the king that they still follow this promise to this day. And even then, they're not even telling each other what this promise is because they were told not to. And so it's really interesting, all the mystery around these promises and all the new events that are arising and how they're still trying to make the world a better place, even though the rest of the world treats them like they're the scourge of humanity and responsible for all the terrible things that happen in this world when they aren't. So I hope this rambling and summary and gushing helped you be a little bit more interested in this series. Number 4 is a nostalgia series for me. I started to read it when I was a young girl. This is Artemis Fowl by Eoin Colfer. So this is a middle grade fantasy series. It is the only middle grade on this list, and I still love this series. I think it's so much fun for children and for older people, even adults, because we're in our world, mostly in Ireland, and we're following Artemis Fowl. He is a young genius preteen, part of a family of criminals. As we start the first book, he is basically pouring all his family's money into trying to find his father, who disappeared a couple years ago. He's able to do this even at 12 years old because his only relative who's still there, his mother, started to be mentally sick after his father disappeared. So he's essentially on his own with his butler. And as he does all this, he finally realizes that he might not be able to find him because he might be dead. And after that, he transfers all of his genius and all this power into reconstituting his family's money, because while they still have some money, his father's last venture left them poorer than they were before, and that's not good for him. And he wants to become even a better criminal mastermind than his family was before. He discovers a magical world that it has been living underground, and he sets off to find who these magical creatures are and everything about their world, so that after that he can find a way to profit from them and get their gold. And he is a criminal mastermind and manages a lot more than that. But that's a story for another time. I think the main interesting part about this is that we did follow this main character who was not good. Because in most middle grade books, you follow a main character, even if they are flawed. These kids are usually very heroic, wanting to do the right thing. They're very black and white in those books. But Artemis Fowl is a terrible character at first, and there is so much character development, so much discussions about, you know, what is good, what is friendship, what is family, what are relationships. As a kid, I really loved following for once a character that was not doing good. Number 5, we have The Queen of a Tearling by Erika Johansen. This series, I cannot talk about it without spoiling the main interesting things I found about this book. I think the only things, and I will be brief, the first book seems like a very standard adult fantasy. A girl who's in the countryside is suddenly accosted by these soldiers who tell her, you're the next heir for the Tearling and you're going to be our queen, and you have to battle this evil witch queen that is trying to take over the lands. Essentially, that's the gist of it. And in the most part, for a book and a half, it is just that. But there's so much more to it. And I think the twist in the middle of the second book made me so interested in the world overall that it was so good. I know the ending of the third book is very divisive. And I agree. I was very pissed off when I finished the third book. But time and time again, I would think about it like every week or so. I would still think about it and think how this book ends and what it means about the world in there and what it means for the character. And I discovered that in the end, I don't think I mind the ending. I think it is a fitting end for the story overall and what the author wanted to say. And that's all I'm going to say about this book. Number 6, we have The Curse of Dragons series by Jenn Lyons, the first book being The Ruin of Kings. This is such an intricate, darker, certainly adult, darker fantasy series, but it is a very complex world. It is also retold in a very specific way. Every book is essentially memories recounted to someone by some way. Either someone recounts them to them so they can write it down, or they take those memories from a recording device they find and write down those. But also, since they're writing this for some purpose to send the manuscript to be read to someone, they do leave out footnotes about some of the passages if they are not happy with the way it's told, if they feel like there's something that is wrong in there, they will chime in. And they have very definite bias about this. And it's really interesting to see that. On top of this, of course, at the end, since it's a very intricate world, we have a glossary of words. Every single book does not have the same back end glossary. I cannot tell you what the whole series is about because as we finish the end, it's so much different from when we start. But as we start, we are following Kieran, who is in a prison about to be executed. The prison jailer is very cheeky and says, like, why not recount me your whole story since you're about to be executed? You know, you have nothing else to do anyway. And he does start to tell his story and what happened to him. But as soon as he starts, the prison jailer is saying, no, you should actually not start there. I think you should start 2 years prior to this point. And she proceeds to also tell these memories, which makes you think that she also knows what happens in some way and has memory of these encounters. So you will have to figure out why she knows them, but also why she's doing this back and forth if she already knows about what he lived through. The premise of the story is that Kieran is the son of a minstrel. They're so poor that Kieran is using some of his thieving skills to steal a little bit to be able to make ends meet. And one day his life completely changes when a dragon suddenly assaults him and starts to tell him about this destiny that Kieran has and how he's destined to end the world. Kieran obviously is very confused, but this incident starts a whole chain of events of him discovering his actual biological family is a very prominent family and he has has to go there to actually live with them, even though everybody scorns him because they hate him. And the whole story is mainly about Kieran trying to understand what's happening. Should he take the words of this dragon to heart, or should he take it as this demonic creature who's trying to mess with his mind, and he's trying to navigate this new world with this noble family that he never heard about and that hates him and bullies him all the time. Number 7, we have Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. This is one of the only sci-fi series on this list. It is a hard one to actually explain to you because I loved going into this book nearly blind. So I will only say what I thought this book was about before I went into it. Usually everyone says is lesbian necromancers in space, and it is actually that. But I think mostly the first book is a sci-fi blended with a murder mystery. I think this series is best if you go in thinking to yourself, I will be confused for most of it. But if I get interested in the characters and the mystery, and if I stick to it, it will make sense as I go and read the books. I think that's the perfect way to encapsulate this. It is very dark. Too, I want to say this. It's a sci-fi book for the most part, but it also blends this necromancy kind of magic that is very interesting. I love that aspect of it. However, I do have to add that this series is not completed. There's still one final book that's supposed to come out, and we don't know when it's coming. It's been a few years. I'm sure the author is just doing whatever they can to put out the best story for us. But if you want to start it, be aware of that. Number 8 is another nostalgia series for me that I think holds up, at least in my heart and whenever I reread it. And this is the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, the first book being Eragon. And until a few years ago, it was a 4-book series that was completed, and it does finish an arc. But we have had since a 5th book, Murtagh, that was released, and it starts off another kind of new arc in the same world. So this series is really an ode to classic fantasy series. It is also an ode to everybody who loves dragon and dragon riders, as you follow Eragon, who is living in this small village in the middle of the forest near mountains. He's just out hunting for his family like he usually does. And he discovers this weird, shiny blue egg in the forest. He thinks this egg might be valuable, so he takes it and tries to sell it at the butcher's for some meat. But the butcher gets really, really scared when he sees this and just tells him to walk away. And so he forgets about it because he thinks like, there's no one else I could sell this to. I'll just wait for the merchants to come in to sell their goods, and maybe I'll find a way to barter it for some good money. Until one day, the egg actually hatches into a little baby dragon, Saphira, and we enter this sweeping tale that happens to Eragon because of it. I love this series so much. I just love the characters. Eragon Murtagh is one of my favorite characters, so I was so happy when we had this new book come out. I know this author, Christopher Paolini, is taking a long time to write his books, but that's okay because most of his books don't have really cliffhangers. They do have mysteries that are unsolved, but I'm okay waiting however long it takes him to write because every time he does, I really love what he writes and I just love the characters. Number 9, we have Shades of Magic series by the Schwab. This one should not be a surprise to anybody who's seen my TBR game because it is inspired by this series. The first book of this series is A Darker Shade of Magic. We are following Kell, who is living in Red London. And in this world, we do have 4 kind of parallel worlds that are overlapping, and some people who can, with their magic, travel between worlds. Kell is one of them. He is an adopted son of the royal family in Red London, and he is essentially a messenger because he is one of the only ones left to travel between worlds and pass messages to the White London and the Grey London. Kell is a messenger, but he is actually running a side business hobby of conveying goods from different Londons and selling them to people who are interested in it, which is very dangerous because this is something that is illegal, especially selling magical objects in Grey London that doesn't have any magic is very, very bad, and he could be in serious trouble. One day he comes across this black stone that is very mysterious and very strange, and he's walking around doing his own thing when he gets stolen the stone by Delilah Bard, who's a cutpurse. Needless to say, she gets really surprised when she finds him suddenly traveling magically to her after she thought that she escaped him. But this stone is more important than either of them know, and after that, they're swept in an adventure that none of them expected and has deadly consequences for this world and the others. Last but certainly not least, at number 10, we have The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. The first book being All Systems Red. This book series is a sci-fi series. We are following Murderbot, who is a sentient robot. This is a private security firm that is making those robots to essentially act as bodyguards for dangerous space missions. People can just contract them for a certain amount of time, and they have certain parameters in them. And this entity, it calls itself Murderbot. This entity starts off essentially very depressed. We know that there is an event that happened and killed off one of its crew previously, some years ago. The company that made Murderbot wiped those memories. They say for safety reasons, but it's anyone's guess. And Murderbot, after those events, even if they don't have any memory of it, they just decided to cut off their control program that the company designed for them. They managed to do this, and they, as they said, they could have gone on a murder spree, just killing off everybody because they were removed from all their safety control devices that were telling them to be safe to actual humans, protecting humans first, sort of thing. And they just say thousands of hours after they pirated this, instead of going on a murder spree, they just go on a binging spree of TV shows, books, movies, all the media that they can consume, they have. I think this character is very interesting in its format because, one, we have, of course, the age-old question in sci-fi of what is sentience? What does it mean to be human? What is the difference between robots and humans? But at the same time, we also have this question of purpose, because obviously Murderbot had a purpose before when they were controlled by this program to protect humans. That was their one and only purpose. And they were only made for that. So what happens to someone when that purpose is gone? What do? Do they continue doing this? But of course, they were designed for this, but maybe they don't want it. Maybe they're looking for something else, and maybe they don't really know what it is. So they become really depressed and just binge TV shows and books and media. We're following Murderbot's adventures as they figure out a little bit more about the world, what really happened to them in that time years ago that they have forgotten, and start to make some friendships along the way. And it's just so interesting. I just love the format. Also, I'm not a big novella person, but I think for this sci-fi series, it works really well. This has 7 books out. Another book is coming out this year, so it is not a completed series. And these are my 10 favorite SFF book series of all time. What are some of yours? Do we have some in common? Please let me know in a comment down below. If you just want to let me know that you're here but have nothing to say, you can leave a star in the comment below for, favorites, because obviously all of them were 5 stars. And with this, I'll stop rambling, get to reading, and I'll see you in the next one.